The battlefield had gone silent, but silence didn't mean peace. Smoke still curled into the night sky, carrying the stench of burning metal and scorched earth. The ground trembled occasionally from distant artillery, and the stars above were hidden behind ash and clouds. Daniel Hayes crouched inside a half-collapsed bunker, a portable lamp flickering on the workbench in front of him. He wasn't a soldier, not really. He was an engineer, someone who knew how to keep broken things working long enough for soldiers to survive another day. But tonight, his hands weren't on broken machines of war. Tonight, they were working on the battle armor of Kayla, the alien warrior who had saved his life more than once. Her armor lay spread across the table like a wounded beast. Jagged cracks ran across the chest plate, and scorch marks burned through the silver alloy. Power conduits sparked faintly when Daniel brushed them, and he cursed under his breath, reaching for a tool from his kit. Kayla sat on a broken slab of concrete nearby, draped in a torn cloak. She was taller than Daniel even without her armor, her frame lean and powerful, her movements precise even when exhausted. Her skin had a pale metallic shimmer, catching the light of the lamp in strange ways. Across her cheek ran a fresh cut, still glowing faintly from the antiseptic patch she had slapped on earlier. Daniel stole glances at her as he worked. She looked calm, too calm for someone who led a charge through enemy fire just hours before. He had seen her fight. She was a storm wrapped in steel, tearing through foes with her great blade while her troops rallied behind her. Yet here she sat quiet, watching him as though the fate of the war rested on his clumsy human hands. "You humans," Kayla's voice broke the silence, deep and resonant, though softer now. "So fragile, yet so stubborn. I watch you today. Fire all around, the sky falling, and you still drag your wounded to safety." Daniel gave a tired laugh without looking up. "And I watched you. You stood alone on that ridge when the rest of us thought we were done for. Don't try to tell me I'm the brave one." Her lips curved into something close to a smile, but it vanished quickly. "Perhaps. But when I fight, it is expected of me. When you risk yourself, it is choice." Daniel tightened a bolt and set the armor chest piece back into place. The system lights flickered weakly, a sign he was making progress. Sweat trickled down his forehead. He tried to focus on the work, but he could feel Kayla's gaze pressing on him like the weight of a mountain. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the hum of tools. Then Kayla shifted, leaning forward slightly. "Daniel," she said, her voice lower, more uncertain. He looked up. Her silver eyes were locked on him, sharp and searching. For the first time since he'd met her, he thought she looked unsure. "Yes," he asked cautiously. Her eyes flickered to the armor, then back to him. Her words came like a whisper carried on the smoke. "Tell me, do you love me, human?" The tool slipped from Daniel's hand and clattered to the floor. For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. The lamp flickering, the wind whistling to crack bunker walls, the distant thunder of war. He stared at her, certain he had misheard. Kayla, the fiercest warrior of the Chari, the commander who had cut down enemies without hesitation, sat across from him with a vulnerability he had never seen. "Kayla," Daniel's voice cracked. "Why would you ask me that?" Her gaze dropped, her silver eyes darkening. "Because it burns inside me and I cannot silence it. I have fought beside many, but none like you. When I saw you today in the fire, unarmed, risking everything for your kin, I wondered if what I feel is only respect for courage, or something more." Daniel's chest tightened. His mind raced with memories. Her standing tall against impossible odds, her hand pulling him from wreckage, her rare laugh when they shared rations under starlight. He had thought about her more than he dared admit, but love? Could he even let himself believe it? He started, but the words refused to form. Kayla's jaw tightened. She shook her head. "Forget it. It is not our way to speak such things. I should not have asked." "No," Daniel said quickly. "Don't take it back. It's just, I wasn't ready." Before he could say more, a low rumble shook the ground. From the distance came flashes of light, followed by the echo of explosions. The enemy wasn't finished. Another wave was forming. Daniel snatched up the last component and forced it into place. Sparks shot out. Then the armor's power core glowed steady. Systems came online, humming with strength. He let out a shaky breath. Your armor's ready. Kayla stood, towering above him once again, the weight of command settling back onto her shoulders. She stepped into the repaired plating, and as it sealed shut with a hiss, she looked like the warrior he knew again. But when she glanced down at him, her armored hand touched his shoulder lightly. Not a command, not a gesture of rank. Something gentler. We will fight again soon, she murmured. But remember, human, I asked and I will ask again. Do not hide from me. Then she turned toward the battlefield, leaving Daniel frozen in place, his heart hammering louder than the distant guns. The war raged on, but now another battle had begun, one inside his own chest. The night sky flared with sudden light as artillery shells streaked across the valley. The ground shook under the blast, rattling the broken walls of the bunker. Daniel grabbed his kit and stumbled after Kayla as she strode into the open, her repaired armor glowing faintly in the darkness. The enemy was regrouping. Scout drones buzzed overhead, and the sound of marching boots carried across the scorched plain. Daniel's heart pounded, but Kayla looked calm, her tall, armored figure cutting a steady path toward the ridge where their forces had gathered. Stay close to me, she ordered, her voice back to its commanding tone. You are too valuable to lose. Daniel smirked nervously. I thought you said humans are fragile. Kayla glanced at him, her silver eyes glinting even through the chaos. Fragile things can still be precious. Her words stuck in his mind as they climbed the ridge. Around them, soldiers, both human and Shari, were scrambling into defensive positions. Some were wounded, others exhausted, but all of them looked to Kayla as she passed. Her presence lifted them, gave them something to cling to in the storm. Daniel felt it too. Even without speaking, Kayla seemed to carry the weight of everyone's fear, turning it into resolve. At the top of the ridge, she raised her blade, the long, curved weapon glowing faintly as it synced with her armor. Hold the line, she told her warriors. Do not let them pass. Then she glanced at Daniel. And you, find cover. Repair what you can. Keep our machines alive. Daniel wanted to argue, to say he could fight, but he saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't dismissal, it was protection. She didn't want him on the front lines, not tonight. So he did as she asked, ducking behind a shattered vehicle and setting up his tools. Already, damaged turrets sparked, and transport engines whined weakly. He threw himself into work, but his eyes kept darting to her. Kayla stood at the front, her armor gleaming as enemy soldiers emerged from the smoke. They came in waves, dark shapes with glowing weapons, shouting in alien tongues. And Kayla was a storm. She moved like fire, her blade carving arcs of light through the night. Each strike dropped an enemy. Each movement shielded her warriors from harm. She was outnumbered, yet untouchable, a wall of steel and fury. Daniel's breath caught as he watched. She was terrifying and beautiful all at once. But then, a blast struck near her position. The shock wave threw Kayla off her feet, her armor sparking violently. She landed hard, her blade skidding across the dirt. Kayla! Daniel shouted before he even realized it. He leapt from cover, sprinting toward her through smoke and fire. Enemy soldiers closed in, their weapons raised. Daniel grabbed a broken rifle from the ground, firing wildly. The shots barely slowed them, but it was enough for him to reach her. Her armor was cracked again, power conduits flickering. She groaned, trying to push herself up. Stay back, Daniel. No chance, he said, dropping beside her. He tore open his kit, hands shaking as he tried to reconnect the sparking conduits. Plasma bolts whizzed overhead, scorching the dirt. Cover him, shouted a Chari warrior nearby. Soldiers rallied, forming a shield line around them. Daniel worked as fast as he could, sealing plates, realigning energy cores. Kayla's breathing was ragged, but she stayed still, trusting him completely. Why? She whispered through the chaos. Why risk yourself for me? Daniel's heart hammered. He looked up at her, meeting her silver eyes. Because you do the same. Because I can't lose you. Her eyes widened slightly, but before she could speak, the armor systems hummed back to life. The core stabilized, and light flared across the plates. Kayla surged to her feet, blade snapping back into her hand as if it had never left. With a roar, she cut down the nearest enemies, her movements once more a storm of precision and power. Daniel staggered back, watching in awe. She was unstoppable again. The battle raged for another hour, but with Kayla at the front and Daniel keeping the machines alive, their line held. At last, the enemy began to retreat, vanishing back into the smoke. Exhausted soldiers cheered weakly. Fires burned across the valley, but for now, they had survived. Kayla approached Daniel, her armor scorched but standing strong. She removed her helmet, revealing sweat-soaked hair and tired but piercing eyes. "You are reckless," she said, her voice sharp but softer than before. "You ran into fire for me." Daniel swallowed hard. "Yeah, I guess I did." She studied him for a long moment, then leaned closer, her voice low so only he could hear. "When I asked you before," she murmured, "I was not testing you. I wanted to know the truth." Daniel's throat tightened. The question hung heavy between them again, but before he could answer, a messenger rushed up the ridge. "Commander Kayla, scouts report enemy reinforcements. 10 times their last force. They'll be here before dawn." The moment shattered. Kayla's face hardened, her warrior's mask returning. She placed her helmet back on and turned toward the horizon. Daniel stood frozen, her whispered words echoing in his mind. "Do you love me, human?" And he realized that soon he might not have time left to give her an answer. The night felt endless. Smoke rolled across the valley, hiding the stars. The wounded had been carried back to the rear lines, but there were few left who could still fight. Every soldier knew what the scouts had said. Reinforcements were coming, 10 times their last number. Daniel sat by a broken turret, his hands stained with grease and blood as he worked to coax life back into its circuits. He was exhausted, his muscles aching, but his mind wouldn't rest. Kayla's whispered questions still echoed in him, louder than the artillery shells in the distance. "Do you love me, human?" He hadn't answered her. He wanted to, part him screamed to, but the words refused to form. He didn't even know what love looked like in a war like this. Bootsteps approached. Kayla stood beside him, her armor scorched, her silver eyes sharp in the dim light. For a moment she didn't speak, just watched him work. Then, in a voice only he could hear, she said, "You should fall back with the wounded. When they arrive, this ridge will be the first to fall." Daniel shook his head without looking up. "I'm not leaving." Kayla crouched, her presence filling the space around him. "You have no weapon, no armor. What do you think you'll do against what's coming?" Daniel finally looked at her, his face smudged with soot, but his eyes steady. "The same thing I've always done. Keep you alive. Keep all of us alive, if I can. You're the warrior. Kayla, not me. But if I can fix a turret, patch a core, or seal your armor so you can fight, then that's what I'll do. I'm not running." For the first time, Kayla didn't argue. She just stared at him, her silver eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. When the dawn broke, the enemy came. The horizon lit up with fire as their forces descended. Dark ranks of armored soldiers, supported by heavy walkers and air drones that screamed through the smoke. The ground shook beneath their march, the sound an army too large to count. The coalition line tensed. Human soldiers gripped their rifles, Chari warriors raised their blades. Daniel stood behind the turret he'd repaired, hands trembling as he adjusted the power feed. Kayla strode to the front, her presence radiating calm strength. Her warriors gathered around her, their fear lessened by her steadiness. She raised her blade high, its glow shining against the rising sun. "Stand firm," her voice carried over the ridge. "We are the line between them and everything we love. Do not break." The enemy charged. The ridge erupted in fire. Turrets blazed, rifles cracked, and the first wave of enemy soldiers fell. But more poured in behind them, relentless. Explosions rocked the ridge, flinging dirt and bodies into the air. Daniel's turret whined as its circuit strained. Sparks flew, but it kept firing, mowing down enemies in streaks of light. Daniel hunched over it. Fingers burned as he rerouted power again and again. Kayla was everywhere at once. Her blade flashed like lightning, cutting down foes that slipped through the gunfire. She fought not only with skill but with fury, protecting every soldier who stood near her. But the numbers kept coming. A blast rocked the ridge, tearing apart the line. Daniel was thrown hard against the dirt, ears ringing. He staggered up just in time to see an enemy walker climbing the slope, its cannons glowing as it aimed straight at Kayla. "Kayla!" Daniel shouted. Without thinking, he sprinted toward her. The walker fired, too fast for her to dodge. Daniel grabbed a fallen power core from a wrecked drone and hurled it with all his strength. The core hit the ground between them and exploded in a blinding flash, knocking the walker off balance. Kayla seized the opening. She leapt high, her blade cleaving through metal, and the walker collapsed in flames. When the smoke cleared, she was standing chest heaving, silver eyes blazing. Daniel lay sprawled on the ground nearby, ears ringing, his arm burned from a blast. She rushed to him, kneeling beside him. "You fool! That blast could have killed you." Daniel coughed, managing a weak grin. But it didn't. Her hand, armored but trembling, brushed his shoulder. For a moment, she forgot the war raging around them. Her voice dropped, almost breaking. "Why do you keep throwing yourself in the fire for me?" Daniel met her eyes, his throat tight. The words nearly slipped out. "Because I love you," but the battle roared louder. And before he could answer, another wave of enemy soldiers crested the ridge. Kayla rose, her blade flashing, pulling him behind cover. The fight wasn't over. But in that instant, as her silver eyes burned with both anger and fear for him, Daniel finally understood his own heart. He just didn't know if he would live long enough to tell her. The ridge was burning. Smoke and fire blotted out the sky, and the ground was littered with craters. The coalition forces had fought with everything they had, but the enemy kept coming. Wave after wave crashed against them until the line finally broke. Daniel staggered through the chaos, clutching his burned arm. Soldiers shouted, weapons thundered, and the cries of the wounded mixed with the roar of enemy machines. He searched for Kayla, his heart pounding harder than the artillery shells raining down. Then he saw her. Kayla stood like a tower among the chaos, her blade drenched in sparks as she struck down 3 foes in a single sweep. But even she looked strained now, her breath heavy, her movements slower than before. Around her, her warriors fell one by one. "Kayla!" Daniel shouted, forcing his way through the smoke. Her head snapped toward him. Relief flickered across her silver eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She slashed another enemy soldier's side and yelled, "Fall back! The ridge is lost. We regroup in the valley." But the retreat was chaos. Many soldiers were cut down before they could even turn. Others tripped over the wreckage or were swallowed by explosions. Daniel ran to Kayla's side, covering her as best he could with scavenged rifles. He wasn't a soldier, but desperation made his aim true. Together, they pushed toward the valley. The enemy pressed them hard, their numbers overwhelming. At one point, a squad of armored brutes cornered them. Kayla fought like fire itself, her blade sparking with each strike. But even she was slowing. Daniel, desperate, threw a stolen grenade that sent the squad scattering, buying them precious seconds. Finally, the survivors reached a ravine at the edge of the valley. They stumbled down into the shadows, hidden for now from the advancing army. Breathing hard, Daniel leaned against a rock. His arm throbbed with pain, his chest heaving. "We can't keep running. They'll hunt us down." Kayla wiped blood from her faceplate, her jaw tight. "You are right, but we are too few to fight them head-on." She looked at him, her silver eyes searching his face. "We need to strike at their command center. If we cut off the head, the body will falter." Daniel blinked at her. "You mean go straight into their territory? That's suicide." A faint smile touched her lips. "It is survival. Sometimes the only way out is through." There was silence between them then, broken only by the groans of the wounded soldiers around them. Daniel knew she was right. He also knew she would go, whether or not anyone followed. That was Kayla, unyielding, fearless, and he couldn't let her go alone. "Then I'm coming with you," he said firmly. Kayla frowned. "You are not a warrior." Daniel met her gaze. "No, but I'm the one who fixes things. And I'll fix this, too." You'll need me. For the first time, her proud composure cracked. She lowered her blade and whispered, "You are the strangest human I have ever met." They didn't have long to rest. Scouts reported that enemy patrols were already spreading through the valley. Time was running out. Kayla gathered the survivors, barely 24 fighters now, and laid out a desperate plan. A small strike team, led by her, would infiltrate the enemy's command post hidden in the hills. Daniel, of course, insisted on joining. Night fell as they moved. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a threat. Daniel stayed close to Kayla, his heart hammering. He had faced danger before, but never like this, slipping past enemy lines, every step a gamble with death. At one point, Kayla stumbled slightly. Her armor dented from the earlier battle. Daniel caught her arm. "Your armor's cracked," he whispered. She looked at him in the moonlight, her face close enough that he could see the faint scar along her cheek, the one she never spoke of. For a moment, the war seemed far away. "Always fixing me," she murmured softly. Then her voice dropped lower, almost tender. "But what if I break in a way you cannot repair?" Daniel swallowed hard. His throat felt dry, but his voice came steady. "Then I'll stand by you anyway, broken or whole." Her eyes widened slightly, and for once Kayla, proud warrior, unshakable commander, looked uncertain. She turned quickly away, her blade glinting as she motioned the others forward. The strike team crept deeper into enemy territory, the night stretching endless around them. Danger lay ahead, but Daniel's thoughts clung to her words, to the unspoken bond between them that no battlefield could erase. And as they approached the heart of the enemy's camp, Kayla's question returned to him, sharper than ever. "Do you love me, human?" He still hadn't answered, but soon he might not have a chance. The hills were silent, but the silence felt wrong. The enemy camp stretched ahead, hidden behind jagged ridges and glowing with faint lights. Strange alien machines moved in careful rhythm, their shapes like crawling beasts. Patrols of soldiers circled perimeter, their armor glinting faintly under the moon. Daniel crouched beside Kayla, peering through the scope of a scavenged rifle. He had never infiltrated anything before. He was an engineer, not a soldier, but his heart beat steadily now. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the way Kayla knelt beside him, calm and fearless, as if danger had no hold on her. "This is it," she whispered. "Their command post lies at the center. We strike there or none of us will survive tomorrow." The survivors, barely 20 in number, nodded grimly. Their faces were pale in the darkness, but their eyes carried the same fire Kayla's did. They trusted her. Daniel found himself trusting her too, more than he trusted anyone. The team moved silently. Shadows were their only cover, and every footstep had to be placed with care. Twice they froze as patrols passed within meters of them, alien voices drifting through the night. Daniel's heart pounded so loudly he feared the enemy would hear it. Then disaster struck. A loose stone slipped under one soldier's boot. The faint clatter echoed across the rocks. Immediately, alien hounds lifted their heads, snarling. Patrol lights swung toward the sound. "Run," Kayla hissed. The team scattered. Alarms blared, the camp erupting in shouts. Blinding lights cut through the night as enemy soldiers poured from their posts. Daniel sprinted after Kayla, his lungs burning, his boots crunching against loose gravel. They dove into a narrow ravine, blaster fire scorching the rocks above them. Daniel stumbled, nearly falling, but Kayla caught him, pulling him close against the wall. For a moment, they were pressed together in the shadows, breaths ragged, hearts hammering. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dark, inches from his own. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice lower than the sound of the alarms outside. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. His throat was dry, his chest tight. The team regrouped further inside the ravine. Their numbers were already smaller. 3 hadn't made it. Kayla's jaw tightened, but she gave no outward sign of grief. She pointed deeper into the canyon. "We move underground. There's a maintenance tunnel here. It should lead into the command structure." They found the tunnel half buried under rubble. Daniel was the one who spotted the faint glow of a power conduit. Using his tools, he forced the hatch open. Inside, The air smelled of oil and dust, the hum of alien machines vibrating through the walls. The survivors filed in, moving through the narrow passage. Daniel walked close behind Kayla, watching the way her shoulders never slumped, how every step she took carried certainty. Even here, even now. But then he noticed her stumble. It was slight, so slight most wouldn't have seen it. Daniel reached out, steadying her. His hand brushed her arm, feeling the crack in her armor where it had nearly broken apart. "You're hurt," he whispered. She shook her head. "It is nothing." Daniel frowned. "That's what you always say." His voice softened. "But it matters to me." For a moment, Kayla didn't reply. She turned her face toward him, her silver eyes unreadable in the dim light. Then she said, so quietly he almost missed it, "And you matter to me, Daniel." The word struck him harder than any explosion. His chest tightened, his breath caught. He wanted to say it then, the truth that had been burning inside him since the night she asked her question. But footsteps echoed ahead, and the moment vanished. The tunnel opened into the command chamber. Alien officers stood at consoles, their backs turned, unaware of the intruders. Kayla raised her hand, signaling her warriors forward. The fight was swift and brutal. Kayla led the charge, her blade a streak of silver light. Daniel ducked behind a console, firing clumsily with his rifle, each shot fueled by sheer desperation. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the chamber filled with smoke and shouts. Finally, silence. The enemy officers lay scattered, the survivors standing among them, battered but alive. At the center of the room, a massive console pulsed with strange lights. Clearly the command nexus. Kayla gestured to Daniel. "This is yours. Can you shut them down?" Daniel stared at it, heart hammering. The console was alive with alien code, symbols that twisted and shifted. It was like nothing he had ever seen. But he set his hands on the controls, his mind racing. "I can try." As his fingers moved, Kayla stood beside him, her blade still glowing, her eyes watching both him and the door. Her presence steadied him, a reminder that he wasn't alone. The system began to yield under his hands. Power drained, signals cut off. The enemy war machine stuttered, its advance faltering outside. But just as he was about to complete the shutdown, the doors exploded open. Enemy reinforcements stormed in, weapons blazing. Kayla pushed Daniel to the ground, her blade flashing as she blocked the first barrage. "Finish it," she shouted. Daniel dug back to the console, fingers flying. The room filled with chaos, warriors clashing, screams, the hum of alien tech. But through it all, Daniel worked, driven not only by duty but by the fierce, unspoken need to keep her alive. Finally, with one last surge of power, the system shut down. Lights flickered and died. Outside, the rumble of enemy machines went silent. The command post was crippled, but the battle wasn't over yet. The command chamber shook as reinforcements stormed through the ruined doors. Armored soldiers poured in, their weapons blazing. Sparks rained from the ceiling, consoles erupted in flame, and the survivors scrambled for cover. Daniel ducked low behind the half-dead console, shielding his face from the sparks. He could feel the heat, the sting of burning wires, but he kept his eyes locked on Kayla. She stood at the center of the storm, her blade cutting arcs of silver light. Every swing tore through enemy armor. Every step forced the intruders back. Her warriors rallied around her, their courage drawn from her presence. But there were too many. A blast hit the wall near Daniel, knocking him flat. He coughed, ears ringing, then forced himself up. Smoke filled the chamber, blurring his vision. He saw Kayla stagger as a heavy brute slammed her against the wall. Her armor cracked with sharp, sickening sound. "Kayla!" Daniel shouted, panic surging through him. Without thinking, he snatched up a fallen rifle and fired wildly. His shot struck the brute's side, drawing its attention. The alien turned, snarling, and Daniel's heart froze. He had just painted a target on himself. The brute charged. Daniel braced for death, but Kayla moved faster. She ripped her blade free, lunged forward, and cut the brute down before it could reach him. She stood panting, her silver eyes flashing, her body trembling from the effort. "Stay behind me," she barked, voice raw. Daniel's chest ached. He wanted to obey, but he couldn't just cower while she bled for him. He scrambled back to the console. If he couldn't fight like her, then he'd fight the only way he knew how. The systems were dead, but fragments of power still flickered. He spotted a failsafe, an overload circuit. His stomach turned cold when he realized what it meant. If triggered, the entire command post would collapse, burying everyone inside. He looked up. Kayla was holding the line, her warriors falling one by one. They couldn't win this fight. The only way to survive was to end it in one stroke. Daniel's hands hovered over controls. He knew what it would cost. "Kayla!" he shouted over the chaos. "There's a way to stop them, but it will bring the whole place down." Her eyes flicked to him, then back to the enemy. "Do it!" she cried without hesitation. Daniel froze. His throat tightened. If he did it, she would die here with him. He couldn't accept that. "I can't!" he shouted. Kayla slashed down another foe, then turned, her face fierce, her silver eyes blazing with more than just battle fire. "Listen to me, Daniel. If you hesitate now, we all die for nothing. If this is our end, let be one that means something." His hands trembled. Sweat dripped into his eyes. He wanted to scream, to refuse, to find another way. But the enemy was closing in, their numbers endless. He saw Kayla falter, blood staining her armor, and the choice was ripped from him. He slammed his hand onto the overload circuit. The room roared with power. Lights flared, alarms screamed, and the floor trembled as the core began to melt down. The enemy's soldiers faltered, confusion rippling through their ranks. Kayla stumbled back toward him, grabbing his shoulder. "It is done." Daniel nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The heat grew unbearable, the walls beginning to crack. Kayla looked at him, her silver eyes softer now, even as firelight danced across them. Her voice lowered, so only he could hear. "You chose this with me. That is enough." Daniel's chest broke open with emotion. The words slipped out before he could stop them. "Kayla, I love you." Her eyes widened slightly. Then her lips curved in the faintest smile despite the chaos. She leaned close, her forehead touching his for a heartbeat. "And I see you, Daniel." The chamber shook violently. The ceiling split, fire consuming everything. Kayla pulled him close, her arms wrapping around him as the world collapsed in a deafening roar. When Daniel opened his eyes, there was silence. Dust filled his lungs. Pain shot through every bone, but he was alive. He coughed, pushing rubble off his chest. The command post was gone, nothing but twisted metal and broken stone. The enemy's soldiers were buried, their advance shattered. "Kayla," he croaked, searching desperately. Then, through the haze, he saw her. Kayla lay half buried in rubble, her armor crushed, her silver eyes dim but still open. She was alive, barely. Daniel crawled to her side, tears streaking his dirt-stained face. "Stay with me," he begged, pulling debris away. "Please, Kayla, stay with me." Her hand reached weakly, brushing his cheek. Her voice was faint, broken. "You told me and I heard it. That is enough." Daniel shook his head, choking on his words. "No, not enough. We're going to make it out. I swear." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. They had survived the collapse. But at what cost? The silence stretched around them, filled only by the sound of their shallow breaths. And Daniel realized the war might not kill him, but losing her would. The battlefield was silent. Smoke rose and slow, heavy clouds from the wreckage of the command post. Where once alarms and screams had filled the air, now there was only the distant crackle of fire and the settling groan of broken stone. Daniel knelt beside Kayla, his hands shaking as he cleared debris from her battered form. Her armor was split and torn, her silver eyes half closed. She breathed shallowly, each inhale a struggle. "No, no, no," Daniel whispered, his chest tightening as panic clawed through him. "Stay with me. Please, Kayla, stay with me." Her hand weakly brushed his cheek. Even wounded, even broken, she carried a calm strength. "You live," she murmured. "That is enough." Tears blurred his vision. He gripped her hand tightly, refusing to let it fall. "Not enough. Not without you." Footsteps echoed across the rubble. Survivors, human and alien alike, emerged from the smoke, their armor scorched, faces streaked with dirt. They froze when they saw Daniel and Kayla, the human who had crippled the enemy war machine, and the alien warrior who had stood like fire itself. A Chari medic knelt quickly beside Kayla, scanning her injuries. His expression darkened. She will not last without immediate treatment. Her wounds are beyond field care. Daniel's heart dropped. Then we'll get her out of here. We'll find a way. The medic shook his head. Our ships are destroyed. The closest medical base is days away. She cannot be moved. Daniel's hands clenched, rage and despair twisting inside him. There has to be something. Kayla's weak voice cut through the despair. Daniel. He looked down at her, his vision blurring with tears. Do not grieve for me yet, she whispered. I am still here. Her silver eyes, though dim, locked on his with quiet fire. And I heard your words. You said you love me. Daniel swallowed hard, nodding. I meant it. I've never meant anything more. Her lips curved faintly. Then I will fight to live. For you. The medic hesitated, then leaned closer. There is one way. Risky. Ancient Chari stasis pods remain in the ruins to preserve high officers. If we can activate one. Daniel didn't wait to hear the rest. He gathered Kayla carefully into his arms, ignoring his own pain. Show me, he demanded. They carried her through the ruins until they found the shattered remains of an underground chamber. Half-buried pods lined the walls, their glass cracked with age. Only one still hummed faintly with power. Daniel laid Kayla inside, his hands trembling as he adjusted the settings. Hold on. Please, Kayla. Just hold on. Her hand touched his one last time before the pod hissed closed. Do not fear, Daniel. This is not our end. When I wake, you will answer me again. Her silver eyes closed as the pod filled with pale light, sealing her in a fragile sleep. Hours later, the survivors regrouped. The enemy army, cut off and leaderless, had scattered. The coalition had won, not by overwhelming force, but by the courage of a few. But Daniel could not feel victory. He sat by Kayla's pod, his heart aching with every beat. Around him, soldiers whispered of the human who had chosen to stay in the fire, who had crippled the enemy at the cost of everything. To them, he was a hero, but to Daniel, he was only a man who had made a promise. When the rescue fleet finally arrived days later, they carried the pod aboard with the utmost care. Medics promised they would stabilize Kayla, though her recovery would be long. Daniel never left her side. Weeks passed. On a quiet morning, in a medical chamber filled with soft light, the pod opened. Kayla stirred, her silver eyes fluttering open. Daniel was there instantly, his hands gripping hers. His heart pounded as he saw life return to her face. Daniel, she whispered, her voice weak but steady. He leaned close, tears in his eyes. You asked me once if I loved you. I didn't answer then, but I will now as many times as you need. He smiled through his tears. Yes, Kayla, I love you, always. Her lips curved into a faint but true smile. Her silver eyes shone with warmth that no battlefield could dim. Then I will live, and I will fight, at your side always. For the first time since the war began, Daniel felt hope not just for survival, but for something greater. Together, human and alien, their bond had been forged in fire, and no galaxy, no war could ever break it.